The plain stretched endlessly beneath the late afternoon sun, a sea of dry gold swaying gently in the wind. The grass whispered stories older than memory, tales of blood and dust, of freedom and loss. Somewhere in the distance, a line of dark green pines guarded the horizon like silent sentinels. This was ranch land, wild and unforgiving, where every breath had to be earned. Ethan Cole stood beside his horse, one gloved hand resting on the worn leather of the reins. The animal shifted its weight, sensing the tension in its master. Ethan's had cast a shadow over his eyes, but nothing could hide the sharpness of his gaze. He was a rancher by trade, a survivor by nature, and a man shaped by years of solitude and hard choices. In front of him, placed oddly in the open field, stood a rough wooden table. Its legs were uneven, its surface scarred with age. And on that table was a sight, so strange it would have stopped time itself if time could still be stopped in the West. A woman. She was bent backward in an impossible arc, her palms pressed against the table, her head hanging upside down, so her dark hair brushed the wood beneath her. Her body was tense but controlled, every muscle aligned with purpose. The dress she wore was torn and dusty, once white but now stained by travel and hardship. Ropes circled her wrists, not tight enough to restrain, but enough to tell a story. Ethan took a slow step forward. His boots pressed into the dry grass with a soft crunch. He wasn't a man easily shaken, but this was something else. "Don't move," he said calmly, though he wasn't sure who he was speaking to, the woman, the horse, or the ghosts of the land itself. The woman's eyes met his. They were sharp, alert, and entirely unafraid. "You're late," she said, her voice steady despite her position. Ethan frowned. "We've met." She smiled upside down, defiant. "Not yet, but we were always going to." The wind carried her words across the field. Ethan glanced around instinctively. No tracks except his own. No riders. No gunfire. Just the open land and a woman who looked like she'd stepped straight out of a fever dream. He had learned long ago that the West never gave answers freely. It demanded patience, and sometimes blood. "What are you doing out here?" he asked. "Waiting," she replied. "For what?" "For you." That answer sat heavy in the air. Ethan's ranch lay a mile behind him. Fences he'd built with his own hands, land he'd fought to keep. He'd been riding out to check on a missing calf when he'd seen the table from afar, standing alone like a challenge. Curiosity was a dangerous thing, but it had always been one of his weaknesses. "Untie yourself," he said. "I can," she answered, "but I won't. Not yet." Ethan studied her more closely now. There was no fear in her posture, no desperation in her voice. This wasn't a captive woman abandoned to die. This was someone who had chosen this moment. "Name," he said. She hesitated, just long enough to matter. "Clara Vale." The name struck him like a bullet. "That's not possible," he muttered. Clara Vale was a name whispered in saloons and sheriff offices across 3 territories. A thief, a runaway, a woman blamed for fires, stolen gold, and the disappearance of men who had underestimated her. Most believed she was dead. "Well," Clara said lightly, "most stories are wrong." Ethan's hand hovered near his revolver, but he didn't draw it. He had learned that drawing too fast often meant thinking too slow. "Why me?" he asked. Clara inhaled deeply, her chest rising against gravity. "Because you're the only one who didn't come looking for me." That made him laugh once, short and humorless. "Lady, I wasn't looking for anyone." "Exactly." She shifted, then slowly bent one arm, testing the rope. With a controlled movement, she straightened herself and stood upright on the table. The ropes fell away, as if they'd never been tied at all. Ethan stiffened. "I told you I could," she said. She jumped down from the table, landing lightly on the grass. Up close, Ethan could see the scars along her arms, old knife wounds, burn marks, stories carved into skin. This woman had lived hard and survived harder. "You should leave," Ethan said quietly. "And you should have ridden past," Clara replied. "But here we are." She walked past him, toward the horizon, then stopped. "They're coming," she said. "Who?" "The men who want me dead." Ethan followed her gaze. Dust rose faintly in the distance. How long? Minutes. Ethan swore under his breath. He looked at his horse, then at the land, then at the woman who had just dragged trouble straight into his life. "Get on," he said. Clara raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" "No," he replied. "But the West doesn't care about sure." She smiled again, this time right side up, and swung onto the horse behind him. As they rode toward the ranch, the sun dipped low, staining the sky red, and the past came riding with it. The ranch gates slammed shut behind them, just as the first gunshot echoed across the plains. Ethan slid from the saddle, drawing his revolver in one smooth motion. Clara was already moving, her eyes scanning the land, her mind racing faster than the wind. "You have a plan?" Ethan asked. "Yes," she said. "Survive." 3 riders emerged from the dust. Then 5. Then more. Men with scarves over their faces and rifles in their hands. Bounty hunters, not the sloppy kind. These were professionals. "They won't stop," Clara said. "Not until I'm buried." Ethan checked his rifle, calm settling over him like an old coat. "Then they'll be disappointed." The first bullet shattered a fence post. The ranch erupted into chaos, horses screaming, gunfire cracking, dust and smoke blinding the air. Ethan moved with practiced precision, firing only when it mattered. Clara fought beside him, fast and ruthless, using knives when bullets ran dry. Between shots, memories surfaced. Ethan remembered the man he used to be, running with outlaws, stealing cattle, living without roots. He remembered the night he walked away, leaving that life buried in the dust. And Clara, she remembered betrayal. Between the roar of gunfire, she told him fragments of her story. How she'd been framed for a massacre she tried to stop. How the men chasing her now were once her allies. How the table in the field had been a signal, a test of fate. "I needed to know if you were still the man who walked away," she shouted as she reloaded. Ethan fired, dropping another rider. "Turns out," he said, "I still am." The fight ended as suddenly as it began. Bodies lay scattered. The remaining riders fled. Silence returned, heavy and final. Clara sat on the ground, breathing hard. "You could still turn me in." Ethan looked at the burning horizon, then at her. "The law doesn't always tell the truth." She nodded. Days later, the ranch stood quiet again. Repairs were made. Graves were dug. Life continued, as it always did in the West. Clara prepared to leave at dawn. "Where will you go?" Ethan asked. "Somewhere the stories haven't reached yet." He handed her a horse. "If you ever need a place to disappear." She smiled softly. "You already gave me one." She rode away as the sun rose, a lone figure against the endless land. Ethan watched until she vanished. The table still stood in the field, a reminder that sometimes the strangest moments change everything. And in the Wild West, fate always finds a way.